Hello and welcome to the Big Story segment here on the BDTV Breakfast Show. This is where we discuss key issues shaping our nation and our economy at large. My name is Elizabeth Musa, and today we'll be exploring the Trump-Zelenskyy Spat and its implications for Nigeria and Africa. We'll be exploring what the controversy could mean for the country and the continent. So, days after President Donald Trump of the United States had a heated argument with President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine at the Oval Office in Washington on how to end the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, the dust raised has yet to settle. The undiplomatic showing between the two leaders has sparked global reactions, while top US officials are said to be piling heat on Zelensky, suggesting he may need to relinquish power after more European nations have rallied around the Ukrainian leader, promising more moral and financial support to defend his country against Putin's aggression, while at the same time seeking better diplomatic ways to end the devastating war. The contrast highlights the most damaging split in the Western alliance, at least since the Berlin Wall fall, and bolstered a sense that the free world has been pushed to the brink of fracturing early in President Donald Trump's new term. But what in a world that has become a hamlet with occurrences in one part having far-reaching implications for others, many are asking, where does this impasse leave Nigeria and Africa? To help us dig into this complicated situation, we are being joined by Collins Nweke. Collins Nweke is a former Green Councillor at Austin City Council, Belgium, where he served 3 consecutive terms until December 2024. He is a fellow of both the Chartered Institute of Public Management of Nigeria and the Institute of Management Consultant. He is also a distinguished fellow of the International Association of Research Scholars and Administrators, where he serves in its governing council. It joins us from Brussels, Belgium. Welcome to the show, Collins.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to see you this morning.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Right. So let me start by asking you, when you saw the video of the meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the Oval Office in Washington, what exactly crossed your mind? It was more like a boss talking to a subordinate and the subordinate trying to stand his ground. What did you make of that entire situation?
Well, on the part of Donald Trump, nothing could surprise us anymore. I mean, it is now very well known that he is quite an unorthodox, very unconventional politician. We also know that he's a very, very transactional individual. And in the meantime, I mean, from his first term in office and now his second coming, we have known that bilateralism and multilateralism are, not quite in his political books. Whereas, transaction politics, but also reciprocity are the sort of things that actually dominate his thinking. So it was not a surprise that he was doing the best he could to shove a deal in the face of Zelensky, and Zelensky's hesitation to actually accept the deal, rather, seeking for, a lasting peace for his country, was something that, quite a lot of people have praised. So it wasn't quite a surprise, but we also know in the time being that, Zelensky is a very, very resilient leader whose, the interest of his country is uppermost in his heart, and that he would do anything at all to defend the interest of Ukraine. Now, some have questioned them, whether he was rational enough to have, confronted Donald Trump in the manner that he did. But ultimately, it is what it is. And, he acted, in the best interest of his country. And Donald Trump, you have to give him that as well. That's who he is. And he believes that he is also acting in the best interest of the United States of America.
Right, and the meeting has sparked pro-Ukraine protests in the United States, with many people condemning the way that President Trump and his team treated Volodymyr Zelensky. Looking at this diplomatically, what will you say went wrong?
Well, what went wrong essentially is that we saw two politicians that are heady in character, heady in terms of, actually being politically stubborn. Both of them appear to lack tact. And so, that was really a coalition cause, because there are many ways to deal with this. You will recall, Elizabeth, that, a couple of days before Zelensky showed up in the Oval Office, Donald Trump hosted, Emmanuel Macron of France, but also the next day or shortly thereafter, he hosted the Prime Minister of Britain, Keir Starmer. Now, there was hardly, apart from the name calling, okay, there were hardly any lies that Donald Trump told in the face of Zelensky that he didn't tell in the face of those two other leaders. But you saw how they handled it, diplomatically, but also sometimes quite ambiguously, and other times, totally ignoring him. Now, in the case of Keir Starmer, he actually started off massaging Donald Trump's ego, by bringing out, a letter handwritten by the King of England, inviting him for a state visit. So those are the sort of tact people deploy to get people like, Trump on their side. But Zelensky is not caught of such wood. And so he showed himself, and, right now, everything is in the court of global opinion. We have seen so far that many, if not all, in Europe have, taken sides with Zelensky, leading more and more to the gradual isolation of Donald Trump. In the US, like you mentioned, there are also protests. It wouldn't surprise me, of course, if there are soon pro-Trump protests as well. But ultimately, it's a drama that we are all, watching and seeing how it unfolds.
Yes, and while we'll see how it unfolds, European leaders gathered in London on Sunday to discuss the fallout of the failed meeting between Trump and Zelensky, and they promised more support. Do you think they can work out a solution without the involvement of the United States, especially now that it seems as if President Trump has a soft spot for Russian President Vladimir Putin?
It's going to be a hard nut to crack, Elizabeth. America is a very, very consequential country in the world. There are no two ways around it. They are undisputedly the leaders at this time of, the free world. At some point, it was Germany. At other times, it was, other countries. But right now, it is the United States of America. And so we can't discountenance that. Now, the European leaders met in London on the invitation of Keir Starmer. And one of the obvious fallouts so far is that Keir Starmer has, pledged 1.6 billion pounds to support Ukraine. We also know that European leaders are all rallying around, actually reprioritizing in terms of trying to see how they will mop up the finances needed by Zelensky to prosecute the war and actually stand up firmly against Putin. So the polarization just goes on. But to your question, as to whether the world can navigate all of these murky terrains without the United States of America, it is doubtful, but it is not impossible. And for it to be possible, European countries have then got to give up one thing or the other, politically, finance-wise, to be able to do it. But the bigger question then is there enough political will within Europe by the leaders? Yes, there are. But then, what about the voters? Because ultimately, you can begin to see a bit of war fatigue setting in here in Europe, where voters are saying, okay, we have this cost of living crisis. Some right-wing politicians are managing to convince them that one of the reasons things have gone up in the shelves of the supermarket is because all their money are being shipped to Kiev in Ukraine, and that the Ukrainian refugees that have now come into Europe so far, about 5 million of them, wow, that they are now helping to share in their resources that would have gone to them and all of that. So none of those is, of course, absolutely correct. It is correct to some extent, but if the voters actually hear those rhetorics, I think Europe will have a very, very hard time actually reprioritizing budget-wise to be able to support Ukraine in the manner that they anticipate, but it is doable.
So Trump has accused Zelensky of being dictatorial and putting the world at a risk of a possible third world war. Do you actually see the possibility of this?
A third world war will not happen, and Trump himself knows it. The reason Trump knows that a third world war will not happen is because Europe is not standing with Trump on this. Europe is standing very, very solidly behind Zelensky, who is just at their backyard. So the devastation or the potential devastation is actually on Europe's doorstep. And so they are going to do anything and everything possible to ensure that, they continue to support Zelensky. And there are reasonable partners across the world. China is watching at this moment, for national interest reasons. We know that China appears to be leaning towards Putin, but we also know that China isn't one of such aggressive countries. Ultimately, common sense, will take hold of issues in China, and so I believe that ultimately the possibility of building an alliance of right-thinking, logical individuals to avert escalation is going to succeed, and so keeping a possible third world war, out of the equation. Now, as far as the name calling is concerned, of course, we know that Donald Trump has a nickname for everybody that he despises, and he despises, Zelensky so very much. Don't forget that, in the election campaign, he tried to get Zelensky to cook up a story against Biden, and Zelensky didn't, cooperate with him. Has he forgiven him since then? We're not aware he has. And so that is in the background, and Zelensky ought to know, or perhaps knows, that those name callings should not be things to be taken seriously.
Let's bring it back home now. Where does this failed attempt by Trump to get Zelensky to agree to his terms to end the war leave Africa? What are the implications for Nigeria, or do you think we're immune from whatever is happening over there?
No. Nigeria, as the undisputable, leader in Africa. I know some people watching this will, contest that, but it is what it is. I mean, in terms of size, influence, and all of that, Nigeria is, is leading so far. What Nigeria has done, and I must, say that they have done the right thing so far, diplomatically. They have deployed that doctrine of diplomatic ambiguity, whereby in matters of this nature, they weigh the pros and cons for Nigeria and Africa, because the focal point of Nigeria's foreign policy is, Africa. So when Nigeria acts on behalf of Nigeria, it also tries to act on behalf of, Africa, especially now that the president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, doubles as, the chairman of ECOWAS. So, what they have done so far is to condemn the invasion of Ukraine, but they stopped it at that. And the reason they stopped it at that is because Nigeria has a relationship with both Russia and United States of America, as well as a very, very strong and increasing relationship with the EU. And so they do not want to be seen to be actually, taking sides. And that is where that diplomatic ambiguity as a doctrine that Nigeria has deployed in sorting this out actually comes in. Of course, it does have its advantages and disadvantages, but, I believe that Nigeria has done, some sort of a balancing act and felt that, unlike Kenya, that they are not going to take sides, because what they stand to gain by not taking sides are much more than what they will lose if they support either side. So far, yes, Nigeria is managing this, pretty well.
Right, and the United States President Donald Trump has ordered a pause to Ukraine aid since the meeting with Zelensky. What are your thoughts on this development?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that. What did he...
He has ordered a pause to Ukraine aid after the meeting with Zelensky.
Yeah, indeed, he has. And of course, it's not a surprise. He campaigned on that, Elizabeth, let's not forget. He campaigned first and foremost on his capacity and ability to stop the war within 3 days. Well, he's been in office now for how long? More than more than 2 months, okay? The war is still going, and if anything, I think we're even seeing escalation, because just yesterday, it was reported that Putin actually bombed a military base in Ukraine. And then also, he promised as part of his campaign that he's going to not only stop the financial flow to Ukraine, but that he's going to seek a refund for the ones that had already been paid out. Now, we know in the meantime that Donald Trump has that penchant for actually making statements that are either blatantly false or impossible or maybe even illegal. It doesn't bother him that he says those things, because the purpose is actually to, strengthen his own negotiating position vis-a-vis the negotiating partner, but also a way of actually, addressing his voters to say, well, I promised you I was going to do this, and I have, tried to deliver, but forces bigger than you and I, is actually stopping us. That's the kind of politician he is. And I mean, if we go by the result of the last election in the US, that formula is working well. That strategy is working well for him. And so, stopping the aid, yes, we see that it is real. It is real in the sense that the sort of finances that, Ukraine needs to be able to, actually defend itself against Russian aggression has been disrupted. Now, we're not going to start seeing the immediate impact, because obviously they still have a stockpile of ammunition and enough finances to show them up. But if Donald Trump doesn't rescind his position at this time, very quickly, perhaps in about 6 months, we will begin to see the impact of America's, financial withdrawal. And that is where Europe comes in, Elizabeth, like I mentioned earlier on. The UK has pledged 1.6 billion, which is not a small money. And I believe that, other European countries will definitely meet Britain up midway, or maybe exceed what Britain has put on the ground, and then creating the space, the room for further negotiations with, Donald Trump to enable, Ukraine to be able to, hold its stand against Putin.
And what are some of the lessons that African leaders can actually learn from this Russian-Ukraine war, which has gone on for 3 years now?
I think African countries have got a lot to learn from the way Nigeria has conducted itself, diplomatically. Now, I have to be upfront about it. All of these things have their risk. One of the obvious risks is that Nigeria, for instance, particularly the current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has made sanitization of international financial system a centerpiece of his foreign policy, whereby he has identified the fact that the financial institutions, international tariffs and agreements and all of that are tilted against Nigeria and the rest of Africa. He wants to see an end to that. Now, another example is Nigeria's, aspiration to have a permanent seat at the United Nations, Security Council. He knows that to be able to achieve these two objectives, he's got to have the support of the Western Alliance. Now, people will expect that, to achieve that, he has to be seen to be lining up behind the Western Alliance in everything of significance that they do. For instance, the war in Ukraine. Not doing that leaves Nigeria vulnerable of rejection in these two key areas. Also, the issue of non-oil exports. As you know, diversification of the economy is also something Nigeria, is taking pretty seriously, and we are beginning to see the result because the Nigerian Export Promotion Council about a couple of weeks ago actually announced that in 2024 they saw a growth of over 20% in non-oil export. Now, these are part of the things that might be affected because of the way that Nigeria, has acted. But ultimately, no one knows which way this war is going to end. And so Nigeria, assuming that position of neutrality, non-alignment, which is historical, that's the way Nigeria has always conducted its, foreign policy. It means that whichever way, things tilt, Nigeria could still, bounce back. And I believe it is the same for the rest of Africa.
Right. Thank you very much, Collins, for this insightful conversation. That'll be all we can take this morning, but I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for having me, and enjoy your week.
This has been The Big Story on the BDTV Breakfast Show. My name is Elizabeth Musa. Keep watching BDTV.